Podcast.
Welcome back to the Unrest Podcast. I'm Carter Coyle.
I'm Kaitlin Stansel.
And I'm Madeline Green.
This is episode 3 of our new podcast, and we already don't have a fully written introduction script, so just roll with us. Buckle up, buttercups. It's going to be a little bit of an improv.
All the best things are.
I
just
better
woke
that
up.
way.
That's why we do a podcast and not a video cast, because we like without makeup or bras on.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
we're all looking rough today.
I have no pants on. Well, I have a blanket skirt.
Okay, well, Madeline, you're telling our story today, and the title is Pandemic Poltergeist, appropriate for everything going on in the world right now.
Right? I mean, how are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Hanging in there.
Yeah.
What is
What is the best and worst part of the shutdown?
I would say the worst part, the hardest part for me personally, and this is just like, surface level stuff. Obviously, it's hard to see people dying and suffering, but it's also really crappy not to be able to go out and eat in restaurants, walk on the beach, like just the kind of idea of getting out and about. I'm walking the neighborhood all the time, but I think it's just hard not to be socializing like you would be normally. But at the same time, I'm pregnant, and like being told that you have to stay home, rest, work from your couch or from your dining room table, like that's kind of ideal in the first trimester because I felt really sick. So it's been kind of, that part's actually been very much in my favor.
What about you, Kaitlin?
I would agree. I think the best part is working from home. Like, I do enjoy that. And I think as a reporter, like we're kind of used to working remotely, whether that's in our cars or wherever we're at. But the downside of that, though, is I feel like all the days run together. Like, even when I do have a weekend or an extra day off, it doesn't feel any more restful than a day that I'm working. It just all blends together. I don't know what time is at this point.
That's really true. I think the days go slower.
Luckily, I've been helping at a chiropractor office, so I still get to go to work. And so that's made it a lot easier, because if I had to like sit here, I would go crazy. So that's the best part, is still being able to go into a workplace and make a little money. The worst part is definitely the not being able to go to a restaurant. I am so sick of cooking.
I feel ya.
Amen.
Like, literally, I don't even look forward to eating anymore because I'm just like over it. Like, the other day I just made Matt a piece of chicken, and I'm like, here, like, eat this chicken. I'm not eating.
I know, and it's so weird. We always have had to eat, 2 to 3 meals a day. I don't know why it's so much worse when you're just at home all the time.
It makes you realize just how much you were eating out before.
Yeah. Oh, that's probably true.
And it has saved money, I think. But what's funny is when you take out the whole eating out aspect, I feel like it makes eating not as glamorous. Like, it's not something like I really look forward to, like I did when we would eat out.
Yeah.
Or just like getting a large Diet Dr. Pepper from Chick-fil-A. It's just not as refreshing when you have to get it out of your refrigerator and open the can.
Right? Yeah, it's just not. It's not. But that kind of brings me to my story, because before I lived in Greenville, South Carolina, where there was lots of restaurants and fun stuff, but now I'm in Statesville, North Carolina, and it's a definitely smaller place, and I'm not used to not having all the luxuries of Greenville at my fingertips. And so it's definitely been a big change. But since I've been here, I have been looking into their ghost scene, and it turns out that there is a pretty significant one. Today, though, I'm going to share with you a historical landmark called the Vance Hotel. Obviously, I really like hotel stories since this is my second one.
The angel coin.
Okay, we like low country stories.
Your angel coin last week. That was cool. The lady in the hotel with the coin.
Yeah. So, but this one's a good one, and it's worth telling. So, backstory on the Vance Hotel. It opened in 1922, a full-service hotel with 72 rooms, a restaurant, a bar. 3/4 of the rooms actually had private bathrooms, which was
Whoa.
considered, a serious luxury at this time.
Really?
Wait,
So
so
I
there
guess
wasn't-
hotels had communal bathrooms?
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that the times have changed. It kind of took me back to my freshman days at the University of South Carolina where we were sharing bathrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
shower shoes.
I was
Oh,
about to
God,
say
the
the
shower
flip-flops.
shoes.
Oh,
the shower
gross.
shoes, gosh, it was terrible. Terrible. And how many times did, like, I don't know about you, Kaitlin, you had a nicer place at Bates, the hot water went out all the time.
Yeah, ours was like older though. And
Yeah.
so like the bathrooms were just not moldy, but like mildewy smelling all the
Mhm.
time. So you didn't really feel clean after you took
Never.
a shower.
So gross. Yep.
Terrible.
I went to University of Georgia, but it's the same thing.
I did not know that you went there.
Yep. Bulldog, born and
That's
bred.
awesome. Yeah,
She
that's
needs
awesome.
to meet Madison.
Yeah, you got to meet Madison.
Oh,
That's where she went.
yeah.
So back to the story. 4 months after it opened, they realized that the hotel wasn't big enough to accommodate all the people that were coming through town. So they added 52 more rooms, making it the social hub for the community of Statesville, historians have said. In World War II, they had a special room just for soldiers to kind of hang out and relax before moving on to their next duty. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson stayed there in 1962, so a pretty happening place. But when the interstate was being put in, the hotel kind of began to lose these large amounts of people stopping by, and it eventually closed in 1972. Some businesses stayed, and the hotel was sold a few times and then closed for good in the 2000s. And in 2012, the city of Statesville actually bought it just for parking purposes. But
So they bought the whole building just for the parking lot.
just for parking. Yeah, it's a totally empty building. You can go see it. I've seen it. It's right downtown, but nothing happens in it. They just use it for parking.
It's still
Yeah.
empty today, huh? Okay.
It's
So
beautiful.
sad.
They should definitely do something with it. I'm not sure why they haven't, but jump to October of 2018, the Statesville city manager gets a voicemail from an out-of-town visitor. He didn't leave a name or a number, but he said he saw a tall man and a girl in white in the hotel with candles through the basement windows.
Ooh.
The hotel is locked up pretty tight, but sometimes people find their way inside and they just assumed something like that happened. They checked it out but never saw anything, and they continued to keep an eye on it for the next few days. The city public information officer of Statesville, who is like us and has a love for ghosts, she actually kind of helps start up some ghost tours around here in Statesville through the Halloween season. So I'm definitely going to try those out. You know how I love a good ghost tour.
We'll have to come visit. And
Yeah,
all do
maybe
it.
we can do that in for Halloween all together.
Yeah, that would be so much
Maybe
fun.
I'll give birth right there in the Vance Motel.
That would be
Oh my
great.
God.
But she talked about how there may be something to this mysterious voicemail. There has been known of a story of a little girl dressed in white standing in the hallway of the Vance Hotel soaking wet. It's always the same exact description, and then they say she just disappears. No one knows where she goes, or they just see her in different parts of the hotel. She would appear upstairs, in the basement, and there have been sightings of her since the 1970s. A pretty cool story of one of her sightings happened in 2008. They used the Vance Hotel for George Clooney's movie Leatherheads. I never saw it. But multiple cast members said that they actually saw her, and they were super freaked out by the hotel in general and her ghostly appearances. I talked to a man who said I could share his experience at the hotel. He was actually friends with the caretaker of the hotel. He would meet him and get readings from the meters in the basement. So I'm guessing that's like electrical readings. You know how they do that sometimes? Yeah, that's what I'm guessing it is. And he said it was always really creepy going down there, and that he would go down there while the caretaker was doing his normal walk throughout the hotel. And that one time he got to the bottom of the steps, and just before he turned the corner, he heard what sounded like bare feet running down the hallway.
Ooh.
He said he never went back down there by himself again, but however, the caretaker would let him and a few friends stay overnight in the hotel every Halloween.
Oh my God.
He didn't want to go by himself anywhere, but then he wanted to stay overnight. That doesn't add up.
He's a murderino.
Can't go by yourself, but I'll take a few friends.
And spend the night. I feel like that would be scarier than, I don't know, maybe both would be scary.
Yeah, but they did this for like 3 or 4 years until the city bought the hotel. He said they would hear noises and other unexplainable things, but the scariest thing that happened was when they were all at the pool of the hotel, which was actually in the basement, and they were trying to talk to ghosts like you see on the TV shows. I'm sure that we've all seen that. That one meme is like the best meme ever. And it's like, can you tell us your name? And then it's like, door creaks. So your name is John.
Or it'll just be like static over there recording, like, shh. And they're like,
right?
Oh,
I mean,
did you hear that?
Sarah.
Did you hear that?
No, I never hear what they say.
No.
Or like lying. See it, like, or it'll look like just a dust speck or something on their camera.
Crazy. But that's how they decided to conjure up these ghosts in the pool. And so all of a sudden they said that the pool lights came on. They all ran out of the hotel, and it took them a while to come back inside, and the lights continued to go on and off throughout the night. So the next day at work, he's telling everybody the story, and no one believes him. So he takes them back to the hotel the next night, and after doing the same thing, the lights come on again. He said since then he was able to actually go down there a few months ago, and he said it was still just as creepy as it was before. So pretty cool story. I also found a lady who worked in the hotel cleaning, and she said there were many times that she would be vacuuming the ramp that led to the great room, and she would look back and find damp children's footprints.
What the hell?
And she talked about an old man who would sometimes be seen at the elevator or in the elevator, and sometimes in the lobby staircase. Kind of sounds like maybe a bellhop type kind of man, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
So there's definitely something going on at this hotel. And with every ghost story, usually it's a tragic event. So I looked in to see what type of events took place there. And it turns out that there is a history of suicides that happened at the hotel. The first one happened in 1928 when a chief cashier at the downtown bank came into his office to find that the federal bank auditors were going through all of his records. He left, got a hotel room at the Vance Hotel, pulled out a pistol, and shot himself in the chest. So obviously,
chest?
Yes.
Okay.
So obviously he was doing something not right there at the bank.
Yeah.
And there's been others who have killed themselves by slitting their wrists, hanging themselves by luggage straps, and even drinking rat poison.
Oh my
What a way to
goodness.
go.
Wow.
All of those sound really painful.
Not something I would want to do.
Mm-mm.
I think I would rather get bit by the snake from our last episode.
So it makes sense then, I guess, that there's just been a lot of grief and like very heavy emotion as people die.
And also, many think that the little girl who haunts the hotel has actually been there long before it was built. The Vance Hotel was built on a lot that used to be home to what do you think was there before?
Indian reservation.
No.
Orphanage.
Close. Go back.
School.
Because I know.
A boarding house.
Oh.
Close.
Ding, ding, ding.
We're in our history, we're screwing over Native Americans, poor children. I knew it had to be one of those.
Right? I mean, it has to be. And there was a death announcement in 1918 where a young girl died from the flu that year. This was the year of the great influenza. And it is said that the reason she is actually dripping wet isn't because she fell into a pool or drowned, but it is sweat from her fever.
Oh, that's so sad. It makes sense.
And there's actually an old photo of people who were staying at the boarding house. I will try to see if I can get a picture of it. I know it's set up at this historical place here in Statesville, but right in the middle of the picture is a little girl dressed in white. Who knows if it's this little girl, but I would like to think so. Needless to say, there's something going on in the Vance Hotel, lots of history and corruption during those times. So if you're ever in Statesville, just take a trip downtown and you will find the hotel still standing and empty.
Wow.
That's
an
a
awesome
very
story.
interesting story. And what a lot of history
Right?
for just that one building. That's very cool.
Well, and if you look at pictures of it, I mean, it doesn't look like what you would imagine as an old hotel that's shut down now. Like, it looks like a nice brick building that maybe like City Hall would be in.
Yeah, it's really neat. And inside, I'll put up some pictures on Facebook and stuff, but inside, I mean, it was a beautiful hotel. Looking back at it, I can see what it would look like in the 20s when it was roaring.
I'm Googling it, looking at it now, and it immediately reminds me of downtown Greensboro, where I used to live. And obviously, you know, there must have just been similar architects and styles. It's so different than even in South Carolina and Columbia or Charleston. Like, it's interesting how different states have their own styles, because this looks very similar to what you would see downtown Greensboro at that time. Very cool.
That is your story for this episode, the Vance Hotel. And crazy that obviously that little girl who died of the flu, now we can kind of relate to this great influenza with this pandemic we're going through.
And her story actually inspired today's Spook School. So we're going to take a look back at the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic and just some context to how it compares to the coronavirus pandemic that we're dealing with today. The
Sweet.
Spanish flu, it's still considered the deadliest in history. It infected about 500 million people globally, and it killed
Wow.
between 20 and 50 million people. But this website I was looking at, history.com, they say that number could actually be more like 100 million because medical record keeping wasn't the highest priority back then. It wasn't
Right.
quite up to today's standards. So that's a pretty big difference, 20 versus 100 million deaths. Regardless, in comparison to the coronavirus so far, it has only infected about 4.2 million people around the world, and a little more than 293,000 people have died. So, not to say that the coronavirus that we're dealing with right now isn't serious, but just in comparison, the 1918 flu, far more deadly and a lot more people infected. And of course, a lot of that probably plays into, again, our medical resources that we have today. Anyways, some of the similarities at the time of the 1918 flu, there were no effective drugs or vaccines to treat this killer influenza strain. Much like COVID-19 today, we don't have a vaccine. There's no known antiviral right now that treats it. So we're kind of dealing with some of the same impacts right now. And then citizens at the time, back in 1918, they were ordered to wear masks, and then schools, theaters, and other businesses had to be closed for some time to kind of, quarantine people and hopefully kill off this virus so it didn't impact anymore. Here was something interesting. So they had kind of the first wave of this virus in the spring, around the same time period that we're dealing with the coronavirus right now. It kind of started in March. And it was not as deadly, though, as the second attack that in the fall of that year. The second wave was highly contagious, and victims would die within hours or days of developing symptoms. And I'm going to tell you why they think that might be in just a minute. But it was also interesting in your story, you brought up that it kind of had this feature where a soldier could stay the night in a special room, because the Spanish flu pandemic, it also has an interesting war scenario to it. World War I soldiers, they were hit especially hard by the Spanish flu, and they were thought to be one of the reasons that it was being spread all over the world, because they were having to travel to different bases across the globe, back and forth to their home countries, and they were bringing this influenza with them.
Right.
But the war also complicated the response to the illness because it had created a shortage of doctors and other frontline healthcare workers. So hospitals were being overrun with these patients, and they just didn't have enough staff. They were having to use medical students to even take care of these patients.
Some of that we have seen, like medical students being allowed to graduate early and because they need them in hospitals and on the front lines and stuff. So that's kind of interesting that's your almost maybe not your front line, but your second line workers.
Definitely. And kind of like what we're seeing today, they were having to use schools and other buildings as makeshift hospitals because hospitals were so overrun with patients. They just didn't have enough space for them all. In states like New York, they even brought in the big Navy ship to help with caring for patients up there. And then this was another interesting thing that I found. So because there was no cure, doctors were prescribing aspirin in an attempt to reduce patients' symptoms. So Bayer's patent on aspirin had just ran out the year before in 1917. So at this point in time in 1918, all these new companies were starting to produce it. And all these medical experts like the U.S. Surgeon General and the Journal of the American Medical Association, they started recommending the use of aspirin to help these patients. They suggested patients take up to 30 grams per day. And I don't know if you know a lot about aspirin. I don't really until I looked into this. But what we now know is anything over 4 grams is considered unsafe and it can be toxic.
Wow.
AKA aspirin poisoning. So
I'm just thinking sometimes when I take Tylenol and that kind of stuff, like it gives me terrible heartburn, let alone taking 30 whatever grams of it. Like I can only imagine the heartburn.
Well, there might be something to that because some of the symptoms for toxicity can produce hyperventilation and a buildup of fluid in the lungs, which kind of relates a little bit to some of the symptoms that they were seeing with the Spanish influenza. According to history.com, it's now believed that many of the deaths associated with that second wave could have actually been caused or influenced by aspirin poisoning.
I'm sure.
Well, and it just kind of shows you how, even with this virus today, there are so many unknowns when there is not an effective treatment that has already been researched. This came out of nowhere. It wasn't like they were prepared with a vaccine and a known way to treat these patients. So you're kind of having to try whatever you can. And, not every scenario works out.
Wow. That's interesting about the aspirin.
And they were kind of saying that with the coronavirus too, I remember.
Yeah, I can't remember which one, but they wanted you to take one instead of the other. Maybe Tylenol.
I think you were supposed to take
ibuprofen.
I did a factor fiction on it a while back. I know it was Tylenol.
I think it's fiction, though.
I think it was mostly fiction, or at least we don't know yet.
However, I still made sure I took Tylenol and not ibuprofen because, I'm a hypochondriac, so I had the virus.
I think I had it too. So back in January after your wedding, Madeline.
A lot of people have told me that after my wedding, everyone got really, really sick.
Really?
I mean, like really sick, and went to the doctor. A lot of people were diagnosed with bronchitis. They tested negative for the flu and everything like that, and they just could not figure out what was wrong with them. And I guarantee that some of them probably had it then.
And that was at New Year's, right? Mm-hmm. Interesting. We should antibody test all your guests.
Yes. I definitely know, like my mom, she got really sick with a fever, and that's when she went to the doctor and they told her it was bronchitis. She had a really bad cough. It took her probably 2 months to feel back to normal. So I feel like she probably had it.
I had to call out of work for 2 days after
the wedding.
That. But yeah, after
now
the wedding.
Kaitlin, she did get really drunk and fall a lot.
I did dance floor. The alcohol might have influenced me being sick.
The alcohol influenza.
But I was coughing like crazy, had a fever for several days. And I remember one day I woke up and I felt like I wasn't breathing. It was so weird. It was like my breath was so shallow. I don't know.
You probably had it.
I want to get the antibody test too. I just don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, it's pretty pricey. I know I saw in Greenville it was like maybe $80 or something.
Yeah.
Well, if it wasn't the Spanish flu, it had to be COVID.
Yeah.
When I had to do something on the Spanish one for work, I remember reading that it really had nothing to do with Spain at all. I don't know if you read that, Kaitlin.
Yeah. They were just saying that Spain was associated with it because they were hit very hard, but also they didn't have this like media blackout. So a lot of media attention was put on that country.
Like the troops in the war, neither side wanted the other side to know that we're all getting sick and weakened over here. And so it was like very quiet. You didn't want your people back home to know, but the people in Spain, which was neutral, were reporting on it. So it kind of made it seem like they were all sicker than everyone else when really that's not the case. So so you kind of, now it's called the Spanish flu, but it's not like it technically, they don't think even started there or anything. It's just kind of a misnomer.
Yeah. Something interesting about just how long it takes to really get a good grasp on illnesses and how to figure out how to treat them. Researchers did not discover what made the 1918 flu so deadly until 2008.
Ooh.
Really?
Almost 90 years later. Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
And what do you mean? Like, what made it so deadly?
So they discovered that there are 3 genes that basically allowed the virus to clear the way for bacterial pneumonia in those patients.
Wow. Icky.
So it like weakened their lungs and, you know, their heart and stuff. And that kind of led to that really dangerous pneumonia.
Sad.
Yeah. Pneumonia is not fun.
Oh yeah. Madeline has had it a few times.
Crazy story. My mom named me after like her great cousin Madeline, and I got pneumonia I guess when I was a kid, and my grandmother called my mom and she's like, Paula, do you remember Madeline? She had pneumonia and that is what she died from. My mom was like, oh, thanks, Mom.
Great.
And I'm still here. Hypochondria started.
Yeah.
Oh my
still
gosh.
Here pushing through.
Well, tell us about your story, Carter.
Well, Madeline, you just mentioned your mom. Today's real life spook is from my favorite lady, my mom, who is she's a retired teacher from Georgia and lives in Charleston with us now down the street. She is a natural born storyteller.
Love it.
She's like the fun hoot of the group in our family. But, you know, as smart and fun as she is, she gets like really serious when she starts talking about her paranormal experiences. So here's what she has to say about the few times in her life she has experienced something out of this world. Well, hello, Mom.
Hey, darling, how are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us on the podcast and for being part of episode 3, because I know you have some kind of spooky paranormal type stories or experiences. So I guess start at the beginning, the house that y'all had before I was born, right?
Right. Well, I mean, first I would say that I probably didn't realize at a young age that I remember as a young child feeling uncomfortable in certain places. And so what I'm describing is a feeling that I have in certain places, and I believe it's as a result of some energy that may be left behind by people that have passed on or bad experiences. And I don't know why that happens to be a gift that I have.
But you've experienced those feelings most of your life, or when do you remember first feeling it?
Well, the very, very, very first time that I experienced it, where I knew what it was and was old enough to understand it, was right after I'd married your father, and we had moved into a new house. And I was so happy and decorated and got to know my next door neighbor. And she was about 15, 20 years older than I. And she was such a nice little mom figure to help me. And she made curtains and all stuff for the house. And so And there were two places in the house that I felt uncomfortable. One was in the living room, and we had a chair there, and I don't ever remember sitting in that chair. And I just didn't feel comfortable there. And the other place was in the backyard, and we had thought about planting a garden out there, and I thought, I am not digging that dirt up. I don't know what's going on in that corner back there, but not having a garden there.
Oh my gosh.
And
yeah.
so,
what if I find a skeleton or something?
Right. And so because I already knew I kind of had this sense about things and energy. And so I finally asked my next door neighbor about it, and her name was Sybil. And when I asked her about those two places, I swear she looked like she was going to pass out. And I said, "What, Sybil?" And she said, "Well, first of all, the man from whom you bought the house died in a chair sitting in the corner that you told me you felt weird in."
Oh.
And then she said, in the backyard where you were thinking about doing a garden is pretty much where my father stood and shot his brains out in the backyard.
Oh my gosh.
And I turned white because I'd never really been able to understand what the cause of the things were, you know?
Right.
And so then I started realizing that maybe I had some kind of little gift of some sort.
So you do see it as a gift and not like a creepy feel. I mean, you think it's something like some sort of experience from God, or what do you think it is?
Well, from whatever higher power. I mean, almost all religions believe in some sort of what they call discernment in the Christian religion. And that means a discernment of the Holy Spirit, it happens to mean in Christianity, which means you're really in touch with the Holy Spirit. And but I just believe that, yeah, from whatever higher power or from whatever God it comes from, I do believe it's a gift. Now, I have not honed it over the years, you know, like some people would, because I just figured I'd know when to use it. Because, you know.
Yeah, you wonder what's the point. You know, what are you supposed to do with that knowledge or those feelings? But maybe.
I mean, you know, I woke up the other day, had a feeling about my neighbor, took her a box of goodies, found out her daughter had just been diagnosed with cancer. You know, so you just kind of have to listen
to those feelings.
Sometimes. Mm-hmm.
Now, you've also kind of had more like premonitions, not feeling things that happened in the past, but kind of the feeling of something bad before it even happened, right?
Well, I wouldn't call them premonitions, Carter, because basically I think that in this case, the person had been there before.
Oh, okay. So tell me the real estate story.
Right. So my best friend from Tennessee, we grew up together. So she has been around me, you know, and so she kind of knows. So we were down at Buckhead, and we went to the Swan House and out to a nice high tea and such. And afterwards we were driving through this really ritzy neighborhood. And I said, look, they're building a couple of houses right here. I said, let's go in this house. It's almost finished, but it's not locked up yet. And she said, okay, let's go. So we walked around downstairs, and it was really beautiful and really big. And then as we started up the stairs, we got to this big landing before you went up to another 5 steps. And I was leading, and I looked at Linda, and she looked at me, and she said, what? And I said, we need to go. And she, knowing me, turned around, went down the steps, and we left. And the next day there was a newspaper article about an agent who'd been murdered in that house.
Oh, it was the next day. It was that soon after.
Uh-huh. So I believe he had been there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, scoping it out and or something.
Because I think I remember saying to your dad, oh my God, that's the house Linda and I were in.
Oh my gosh, that had to be the strangest feeling.
Yeah, so he had to have been there. And so that's what I'm saying. I can feel energy. I think that's why I'm cool with being alone as much as I'm not alone. You know, I'm cool with being alone because I do think that I have a sense of people leaving their energy behind after
but
they
I think
go.
I would be afraid of that. But you're not. You don't seem afraid of it. It doesn't feel threatening, I guess.
I have only had one experience when I was afraid of it, and that's when I was at a Christian conference, actually at Carson Newman University, and we had gone to a Christian, conference and to hear speakers and stuff. We got put into this room where it had, it's like a dorm room. So there's like 2 bunk beds on one side and 2 bunk beds on the other side. And 4 people slept together. And so it happened to be Linda and me, and then 2 other women who didn't know each other and didn't know us. But you think, you're at a Christian convention in the 70s, you might be safe,
Yeah,
at Carson Newman, you know what I mean? Prior to all this weird stuff that's happened since. And so anyway, we went into the room, and then when that woman came in, there was this 4th woman showed up, and she was staying in a room with us. And she sat down, and she was so friendly and so nice, and everybody was talking to her. And when she left the room, I looked at Linda, and I said, I ain't sleeping in the room with her.
Really?
Right. And so I literally slept. I mean, this is so weird. I slept in the hall because I was not going to sleep in the room with that girl. There was like a bench or something in the hall. I slept in the hall.
What was it? Oh my God.
So, right, the next day, the next day, the girl doesn't show back up to the room. And so one of the girls, I said, where'd she go? And one of the girls said that she was some kind of evil devil worshiper trying to infiltrate a Christian conference, and they asked her to leave.
No.
Now, how did I know that shit?
What?
Tell me, how do I know that shit?
And
how did I sense that?
Of course, she gets assigned to your bunk.
Of course.
Dang.
So it's not just dead people; it's just energy.
People.
That's
what
I mean.
Energy.
I guess.
Wow, that is so crazy. I never heard that one. Wow, so interesting.
I got a lot of them, girl.
That is so interesting. It's kind of a cool thing. I don't think most people would.
Yeah,
even know.
Only time I've ever been scared was retrospectively when we went to that house.
Yeah.
And then in retrospect, I was like, whoa. So, but and I did, and I have been, had a minister, Peter Lord. He's a renowned Southern Baptist minister. I think he was also charismatic, and not charismatic. Is that the right word? Yeah, in the charismatic movement. But
I have no idea.
he was like, you should develop this. You should develop this for, and I just never did want to because, there is a fear. Who wants to do that every day for a living,
That's a little
in
much.
some weird way. And what kind of job would I do? Well, here's what I can do. I can teach, and I can go into education, and I can use that empathy or whatever that gift is with the students. And
feel out, who needs help, maybe.
Maybe. So, anyway.
You did that for 30 years. You get to retire.
35.
Well, thank you for sharing, Mom. That's really cool. I like hearing them.
I will end it with this. My best friend, she's a real estate agent that's done 30 years in the business in Atlanta. She will not buy a house until I have been in the house alone and walked through the home alone.
And given it the seal of approval.
That's right. Because she's seen it too.
So weird. Very cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay.
Well, next time we're buying a house, give Fran a call for a small fee. She'll walk through it.
Yeah, that's right.
I love you. Thank you, Mama.
I love you too.
So that's my mom's stories. She has several, as you can tell. And really growing up, she's not a superstitious person. She doesn't talk about ghosts. She's really Christian but she just believes in kind of, I think, these feelings or these vibes that some people can be tuned into. So she doesn't ever talk about it unless I bring it up, but I just think they're always interesting to hear.
I think so too. I think we all have the ability to, be very intuitive to feelings. I actually just read this book. You have people who are clairvoyant, but there's also other types of clara whatevers. And one of them is like the intuition of feeling. And I definitely can relate to her on that because there's been multiple times that I have had certain feelings. Can't really explain why or anything like that, but something bad has happened afterwards. One specific one was me and Matt were driving home from Canada and I just got this like overwhelming sense of like grief, I guess. And I'm like looking up in the sky and I just start crying. Don't know why. Matt thinks I'm crazy. He's like, what's going on? I said, I'm not sure. I'm just like really sad. I don't know. Jump forward a few hours. We go and sleep in the trailer because it's a long drive home and someone else is driving at this point. Well, my phone is just ringing and ringing and ringing. And I jump down and I have like 50 missed calls. And I'm like, all right, something bad has happened. And my stepmom answers, and I guess she would be like my aunt in a way, as my uncle's fiance, and she had just had a baby probably a week earlier, and she passed away. And she's telling me this, and literally like at the time that she passed away was the time that I was having that like really weird grief type feeling. So I can definitely relate, and I think it happens all the time to me at least, and I'll be like, all right, this is weird, and I don't ever really talk too much about it, but I think that it's definitely like an intuition type feeling.
That's fascinating, and it's sad, but it's kind of comforting too in a way to think that you were thinking about her on her way out, so to speak.
Yeah but that's like a lot of people, because being obsessed with ghosts and stuff like that, like, yeah, I've never had a paranormal experience myself, but in a way I feel like I am very intuitive and would be open to it if it happened.
Very cool.
Definitely.
Y'all. Fun episode.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us. That was a great third episode of the Unrest podcast. We'd like to hear everybody's real life spooks. We're running out of relatives and friends, so call us. Email your details and your stories to theunrestpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can call us and leave a voicemail of your story in its entirety by dialing 843-564-2101. That's 843-564-2101.
We'll have another episode next Monday, but until then,
Unrest in peace.